Okay, so why don't we start? Good morning, everybody. Let's start the new sif. So the Imrei Yaakov writes. The Rav Shulchan Aruch writes, "Asur liknos mehaganav." You're not allowed to purchase stolen property from a ganav. Hachefetz sheganav. In other words, specifically the stolen object. We're not saying that you're not allowed to buy anything from him, but if you know that something was stolen, you're not allowed to purchase it from him. Va'avon gadol hu, and it is a serious offense. It's a serious sin. Shaharei machzik yedei ovre avera, because in doing so, you are supporting sinners. You're supporting, in other words, you're encouraging people to continue to do offenses. Va'alzeh ne'amar cholek im ganav sonei nafsha. King Solomon writes in the Proverbs that he who divides with the thief will eventually hate himself, will eventually come to hate himself because he realizes how wretched of a person he is. And begorim lo lignov genevel sacheras, and you're encouraging him, and you're actually causing him to commit further acts of crime. She'im lo yimtza lo keach eno gonei, because after all, if he's not going to find anyone to purchase from him, he's not going to steal. I remember someone showing me the DVDs that he had purchased from a particular ethnic shopping area, which had an Eastern flavor to it. In other words, you get these DVDs of the latest movies for $1 a piece. And it's clear that they're bootleg copies, right? So I said, how could you do that? And so he made up some excuse, but this is a classic example of stealing, of purchasing from a ganav. He says, and while it's true that he can always find other people to support his thievery, and he can even go to a place where no one will know that these items, that he's a thief and that these items are stolen. He says, Ein ze matzui lo kol kach. Yes, that's true, but he would have to travel far, and you're making it easier for him. V'im kol yodavu makirov lo yiknu mimenu lo yignov kol kach. And if at the end of the day, people who know who he is will not buy from him, so then he won't be incentivized to steal, because you're making it so easy for him. He just has to roll out of bed, and all of a sudden he's got customers. Lefichach asur l'chol yodav liknos mimenu, and it's for that reason that anyone who knows him and knows that he's stolen these goods, you're not allowed to purchase from him. V'chein asur liknos migazlan, and just like you're not allowed to steal from a ganav, you cannot steal from a gazlan. Ela im kain miskaven letovas haba olim lahachzira lahem. Unless, and here's the big proviso, what if your objective is to purchase it from him so that you can get it back to the owner? Vehem yachziru lo ma'osav, and the owner will give you back the money. So we know stories of, I've read over the years stories of where a fellow, let's say, after the war, I know of a man who saw a Gentile selling pieces of parchment from a Sefer Torah, and he purchased them in order to preserve them, in order to save them. I also know of a case where a person sees a non-Jew on the subway, with a religious artifact like a tallis bag, and he offers him money to buy it from him so that he can get the tallis back or the tefillin back to the owner. V'hu shaba olim lo hayu yicholim lahatzil ba'atzman im lo hayakonahu. And this is a situation where the owner does not have the ability to buy it himself. Obviously, if the owner has the ability to buy it himself, so then you shouldn't intervene. But if it's a situation where if I don't buy it, I may never see him again and so forth, so then you certainly are permitted to purchase it from the Ganav so that you can get it to the rightful owner. Okay. Okay, so let's take a look at the Imrei Yaakov. Asur liknos me haganav. You're not allowed to purchase from a ganav. V'chein asur l'sayeya leganav b'shum davar kedei sheyignov. You're furthermore not allowed to aid or support a ganav in any way to enable him to steal. Vafilu b'safek im hu shayach ligneva yesh li zaher bo. And even if there's a doubt that maybe this will assist the ganav in some way, you're obligated to stay away. Okay. Liknos me haganav, so you're not allowed to purchase from a ganav. V'hu adin lekabel b'matana aser. You're also not allowed to accept it as a gift. V'dafka me haganav atzma. But that's only if it's coming directly from the ganav. Avalim kfar machru la'acher v'rotza liknosu mimenu. Ayin lekaman seif yud yud aleph u'seif chav. But if it's already changed hands, if the ganav has already sold it to a third party, whether or not you're allowed to purchase it from a third party, so that we're going to see later on. And Sif Yud, Yud Aleph, and Sif Chav of the, we'll continue this discussion. Hachefetz sheganav. You're not allowed to steal the object. Now, v'im hachefetz nishtana shinui she'eno chozer libriyaso. But what if you're not purchasing the actual original item? What if the item itself has been processed or changed in some way such that it's not something that can be returned intact to its original owner? The ganav has to pay him money to make restitution. So in that situation, mutar liknoso kedeisa lakaman sif chaf gimel. So that we're going to see later on that you are allowed to, and we'll see. We'll have to. We'll take a look at the biurim in just a minute to see what the parameters of that are as well. And the idea is you're machzik yidei overei avera, and you're supporting, you're aiding and abetting people who wish to commit sin. Va'over alifnei iver lo sitein michshol. And you're violating the precept of do not place a stumbling block in front of a blind person. In other words, lifnei iver is enabling another person to sin. The gorim lo lignov, and you're causing him to do further theft. The Gemara amru al zeh mashal. The Gemara gives an analogy or parable. The amri inshi lav achber aganav elachur aganav. As people say, the Gemara says it's the saying that it's not the mouse who steals the cheese, but rather the hole that steals the cheese. Upirish Rashi, ilmole chur shehachbar matzia gnevaso sham lo hayagonik. And Rashi explains that if there was no hole in the wall where the mouse could store away its stolen items, it would never steal. And so that in the same way, if I'm enabling by being, if the ganav had no customers to offload his stolen goods, he would not steal. So I'm enabling him. I'm the hole. I'm the mouse hole. And I'm going to have more to say about this, he says later on when we get towards the end of the siman. Okay. So that's the whole sieve, and there's much more to discuss because we're going to see some more scenarios as we go along in the ensuing seifim. But let's just take a look at this. We'll just start this piece in the Biurim today. Hachefetz shaganav. He says you're not allowed to purchase the item that he stole. V'yesh levarer mahadin hecha shahachefetz shagazal nishtana shinoi she'eno chozer lebriyaso da'azu nikna legazlin. He says regarding what the Imrei Yaakov, what we just saw that he just wrote, that if the object is transformed in some way, so that when the Ganav wishes to make restitution, he cannot restore the original item to its original state, so he would have to make monetary payment, and the object now belongs to the Gazlan. Af im lo hayeyesh ba'olam chumavor begemar bava kamet sadi gimel v'shulchan aruch simin shin samach sif hey. He says, as we've clarified from the Gemara and appears in the Shulchan Aruch, va'ayin la'el sifav, and as we saw before in sifav, v'im kain sarich iyun ha'im shari liknosa mehaganav. So what about in that situation? Can you purchase it from a ganav? V'licha ora, and it says at first glance, hayanira sha'asur liknosa. It would seem that in all cases it's asur, right? Why? Because shaharei hatam sha'asur liknos mehaganav hachefet shaganav hukamo shakasav harambam perakeme hilchos geneva halacha aleph. He says it would seem that the reason why you're not allowed to purchase items from a ganav is this the Rambam stated, Shehu machzik b'seyidei ovrei aveira v'garm lo lignav genevos acheros. He says because you're aiding and abetting theft, a thief, and you're encouraging him to do more theft. And as the Rav Shulchan Aruch has indicated, it would only be logical to suggest that even if the object has been changed in some way, let's say, for example, the guy stole raw wool and he turned it into a garment, right? So it's completely changed. It now belongs to the ganav. He owes restitution to the person that he stole the wool from, but this object is completely transformed. He says, but it would only stand to logic that I still should not be allowed to purchase the garment from him, because if we give you a heter to purchase from him, it's only going to encourage him to steal further because he sees he can get away with it. And the Maharshal, who lives in this, I think the 16th or 17th century, actually does say this, because he writes after quoting the Rambam that you're not allowed to aid or encourage a ganav. He writes, and this is after writing that you're not allowed to purchase from him because you're encouraging him to do further theft. Mashma da'iri afilu b'geneva shekana haganav b'shinoi l'kulei alma. He says that it implies that this is true even when the object that he stole has been transformed. But he says, but it's nonetheless asur because you're encouraging this kind of theft. And what about the fact that the Mishnah seems to say that you're allowed to purchase already woven wool, even if you know that they stole the fleece from the sheep, but once they've turned it into textile material, you're allowed to purchase it from them. Mashma da'afilu lechatchila mishum dekanya b'shinoi, which implies that as long as it's changed, it's okay. This is the question the Maharshal asks. Hainu davka davar shecheskasu ganu ve'ino vadai, aval vadai ganu v'asur la'olam ad kan l'shana. He says that's only when two things have happened. Number one, it's been transformed from the state from when it was stolen And number two, you don't know for certain that this object came from stolen goods, but there's a suspicion because it came off a back of a truck or something like that. There's a suspicion because you're getting it in a mall, right, where these things typically take place. But if you don't know for certain, so then it's okay. But if you do know for certain that it was from stolen goods, then you're not allowed to. So that's the way that the Maharshal sees it. He says that I see a difference between when there's a suspicion that it was stolen versus when you know for certain that it was stolen. Hare mavur lehedja b'dvarav da'af b'chefet shenishtana mikol makom asur lechatchila liknoso. So you see from his words that even after the object has been transformed from its stolen state, you're still lechatchila not permitted to purchase it, mishum shal yidei zeh gorim leganav lignov od, because you're only encouraging the ganav to steal further. So that's the first point. He says, Ulam be'emes, ein davar zeh pashudu muskam l'kuli alma. He says, the problem is that this is not so simple, says Rav Stern. The Hayam shel Shlomo Atzmo beperik Meruba Siman Zayin, Hevi b'shem HaMordechai v'Hagos Maimoni shekasa b'shem Rav Haigon, the Hecha the Haganav Kones HaChefetz Haganav az mutar liknos mimenu. He says there are certain commentaries who write, and the Maharshal himself writes this, quoting others, that when the Ganav Hecha de Haganav Kana es HaChefetz Haganav, if the Ganav purchases the stolen item, Az mutar liknos mimenu, then you're permitted to purchase from him. Let me just see. Not sure what that means. The Hecha de Haganav Kana es HaChefetz Haganav v'chein kasav b'shut harivash simez b'zel shano. Aval emes hadavar shein lechalek bazeh ben safek levadai dafilu bevadai gomer mol shinoi v'hu shalo legamrei ela shechayev lenigzal damim u'mutar likach mimenu ad kan l'sham. So I think that there's a typo here. I think it's the Hecha de Haganav Shina es HaChefetz Haganav, where that's really the way it's supposed to read, where the Ganav has transformed the stolen item. So then he's saying that you are allowed to purchase from him. Let me just make a note of that in my copy. So the point that he's making is that there are some commentaries who say that it is okay to purchase from him, and there's no difference between whether you are suspicious that it's stolen or whether you know for certain that it's stolen. Ma'ayin Shar HaMelech v'chein yotze mitoch divrei Tosfos v'chein meharasham u'mehatosfos such and such, and he says basically he's bringing a whole bunch of sources. The Spirlahu dehecha deikayesh bilvad shori liknos mehaganav. He says some hold that as long as the owner had yeush and gave up hope of ever retrieving it, then you're permitted to purchase from the Ganav. He says, Achein bazeh pasuk kana Rav da'asa liknos mimenu. But the Rav Shulchan Aruch disagrees with that even if there was yeush, you cannot purchase, kevin debiyesh bilvad lo nikna adain, because it hasn't transferred over into the possession of the Ganav yet. Aval hecha shenishtana legamre birshuso mashma deshori liknos mimenu. But when it's been physically transformed, then it seems from these aforementioned commentaries that you are permitted lechatchila to purchase from him. And it seems that we'll see that later on in Sif Chav Gimel, that we're going to see that stated explicitly, that when it's been transformed, you can purchase it. With this, I would suggest that we can answer a question that the Rashba asks on Rashi. The Rashba and Rashi obviously are medieval commentaries V'zelashono, Brisa beperak hagozel umachil Imrei ein lokchin min haroim lo gizin velo tlushin v'lokchin mehem tefurim. He says the Rambam writes that you're not allowed to purchase from the shepherds who are suspected of stealing from the owners, that you're not allowed to purchase raw fleece. But if they've transferred it into textiles, you may purchase from them. Upirish Rashi al de abigodim koi, betama harashba zal tipshita de kanan b'shinoi ad kan lashono. And so the Rashba says, isn't that obvious that you can purchase from a ganav once he's transformed it? Avalafi hanal nira liyashiv shitas Rashi de ein zepshita klal de other rabbi yesh b'chidish de avshikano mikol makom adayin lo yadanu de shoy liknos mehem lechatchila da reish makom lesser. He says Rashi's point is that even though there's still a logical argument to say that it's usher, he needs to point out why, because because you're just encouraging them to steal in the future. And that's why Rashi needed to make a point of saying that as long as it was transferred into garments. Oh, okay. So he's just going through a little bit of background material to try and resolve it. But in any event, he's sticking to this point, and he's basically saying that there's a preponderance of commentaries who do suggest that once an object has been transformed, you're allowed to purchase it from a ganav, even if you know for sure it was stolen, and not like the Maharshal, who suggests that you're not allowed to. Ulam adayin sarich iyun. My time of be'emes pasuk harav lekamen deshoy liknos eicha shenishtana. But we really have to ask ourselves the question: if you're still encouraging a guy to steal, why is it permitted? Why are we not worried that you're further encouraging him to steal? So he gives the answer as follows. He says, I would suggest as follows, that every act of theft involves risk. Because anytime a person steals, he's taking a huge risk with his life and with his freedom. Because if he gets caught, number one, he may get shot, he may get killed, he may get arrested and thrown in jail. And based on that, limkor miyadis hachefetz hagonav beli hamtana v'tircha. So therefore, the attitude of Chazal may have been this, that if he can easily unload it and not transform it, not manufacture it, but he can just basically steal it and the same day unload it without a lot of burden, azim yiknu mimenu es hachefetz hanignav ze gorim lo sheyignavod. So that's going to encourage him to steal further. The very fact that he can so easily unload it. But if he has to transform it in some way before people will buy from him, such as raising and cultivating livestock, or if he steals lumber, he's going to have to transform it before people will be permitted to buy from him. He's going to have to sand it down and refine it, or to reshape it. Or if he steals gems, and he's going to have to cut them and refine them in order for people to buy them. He says, "Kol elu tzarech zman otircha liknosin b'shinei ma'aser." All of these things require time and they require effort. V'lachein lo asru liknos mimenu de'ein zegorim kol kach sheyignov od. He says this is not as much of a direct causative act that will encourage him to steal in the future. Kevin shebenosef l'maisa hageneva shetzarech l'sakein nafsho tzarech od litroach bo. because in addition to having to steal, he also has to process these items to keep them with him for an extended period of time and to further endanger himself. And therefore, this shows that that you're not the direct cause of him doing this activity. And even though you'll still argue, but still, the fact that I'm a customer is only encouraging him to do this. But since it's not as causative, like a regular item that he can just unload the same day that he stole it, Chazal did not feel it necessary to intervene and to stop us from participating in this, from buying from him. Since at the end of the day, the Gazlan is now the owner of the object and he owes restitution, but when you purchase it, it's already his. It doesn't belong to the previous owner. And he says, "Ein Imrei Yaakov le'el sevav diramaschu yotze yedei chovasa." And as we saw before in the Imrei Yaakov, in Seif Vav, to help a person fulfill his obligation. And I guess what he's referring us to, let me just bring that back up. Here the Imrei Yaakov is talking about how when an object has been transformed, the Ganav acquires it, and he only has to make financial restitution, but not return the original item. And this is true even if the owner has not given him a hope of retrieval. That's really all he's making reference to in that paragraph. So basically, it belongs to the Ganav completely. And therefore, when it belongs to the Ganav completely, because he's acquired it through transforming it physically, so there are a number of poskim who say that you are now allowed to purchase it from him, simply because the rabbis only forbade us from purchasing from a Ganav when the object is not legally his. And it's still
Rabbi, even those videos in the mall, I mean, I guess they've taken it and they've made those copies from something that was acquired in an appropriate manner. Could you make that?
Yeah, but that when it comes to intellectual property, I think you'd have a harder time of saying that it's been transformed. It's the same film that was produced. So I don't think that there's a shinui maisa there.
Right.
And by the way, this whole thing still disturbs me. In other words, I'm not completely satisfied.
I understand
that if you what we're talking about is, certainly we're not suggesting that you collude with a guy who you know is stealing and you say to him, if you can get your hands on some goods and make them into a garment for me and conceal them so that they don't look the same as they originally were, I'll be happy to purchase them from you. We're not talking about that. We're talking about where this is a Ganav that you don't have a business relationship with, and you happen to suspect that he's selling these textiles for so cheap that it must be that, but you're able to verify that they're not stolen, but maybe the original materials were stolen.
Yeah, that's a good distinction.
Yeah. So then we would permit you. But if the original, if they stole them, we'll have to take a look at the law about knockoffs. That'll be an interesting shaila, because that's also intellectual property. Like a guy buys a Gucci bag, but it's not Gucci, but it's a knockoff. Is that permitted? So I'm curious to see what we're going to see later on. All right, so we're going to hold it here, and we're not going to be learning tomorrow because it's Erev, and got stuff to do. Got to sell your chametz. So let me take care of that. And we're not going to learn over Chol HaMoed. And then I'm scheduled to leave town right after Pesach. So I will be in touch with you all to let you know when we'll be resuming. I'll stay in touch with you via WhatsApp. Okay, everyone? So let me wish you all a Chag
Sounds
Kasher.
good.
Chag Kasher v'Sameach. And
Sameach, Rabbi.
Wayne, you enjoy your one Seder.
I would, so much so.
And the rest of us will enjoy our 3-day Yontif, while you only have 2 days, Shabbos and Sunday. And just have a wonderful, wonderful Chag. Try and relax, everyone, and everything will be good. We're coming out of this very soon, and wishing you a beautiful Yontif. Enjoy it with your loved ones. So, Chag
Sameach.
Sameach.
Rabbi.